Okay, we're drifting in now. All right, thanks for coming. For those who are here, last week was electric, right? And I learned so many things last week from the presentation by La-Toya. I'm sure others are now drifting in slowly. And so we are going to be exploring part 2 of reconciliation. How do we reconcile? How do we challenge ourselves as individuals? How do we change narratives? How do we reflect on some of the issues that life throws at us? And so, La-Toya, the information is there. La-Toya is an expert in this area. She works with the police on a regular basis. She travels the length and breadth of the Ontario area. Sometimes she flies, sometimes she drives. Sometimes Craig causes her to drive, and sometimes he causes her to fly. That was what she said last week. So, but we're here today, and we're going to see, I'm sure we have some practical, there'll be some practical conversations that we're having. Just be aware that we're streaming, all right? We're streaming, so it's live, on stream. Please put your best face on. Not just that, but if we can avoid walking in the center aisle, it's very important so we can give space to the presenter. All right, we should have started at 6 p.m. We have had to make a shift for that, and so please forgive us. If you're online, please forgive us. Just give us a wave online. And if you know of others who wanted to catch part 2, please send them a like, subscribe, and share. And I did say don't do that in my sermon, but just for this purpose, please do that. Right, so shall we stand and have a prayer, please, as we get into this very important presentation that is going to change your life forever. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for today. As we come to participate in this program, as we come to listen, as we come to journey in this program, may we pick some information that will help us, that will empower us as a unit to see where, what, and how we need to do so that we can have an inner peace, we can have a clear mind, so that whatever is broken and we can fix, and whatever we can connect, we can reconnect. Inspire, motivate La-Toya. Bless him, bless her family. Cover her, we pray, as she presents in Jesus' name. Amen. So, brothers and sisters, Sister La-Toya Campbell.
Thank you, Pastor. How's everyone? Just okay? You were fed. So you should be better than just, okay. How are you? Okay, that's better. I want to say thank you again to everyone for coming out. I find it interesting because sometimes we talk about Sabbath rest and then there's no rest because we're doing all of this stuff. But I think this is really important. So I'm really happy to see some, repeat customers come back. I guess last week was okay. And some new faces. I'll do a little recap to share some of what we talked about last week so that we're all on the same page to move forward. How does that sound? Good? I need my presentation up. I don't know if it's there. But it's interesting. I was thinking, as Pastor was praying, conflict is all around us. Issues are all around us. Challenges are all around us. And there's a lot of things we talked last week about triggers and those things that kind of set you off. Are we good? Awesome. And the presentation's up? There we are. And I think about why this is important to me and why I'm here. For those of you who weren't here last week, I've been doing conflict management in various capacities professionally over the last more than 15 years. And it's been in most recent years of my life where I've seen that God has really just called me to this work in particular, and that there's such a great need. And so in the work environment, it's one thing, right? When you get a job And Pastor talked about this, during his sermon today. You get a job, and you're in the job, and you regret accepting that job. And oftentimes, it's because of issues of conflict. It's because of disagreement. It's about, bosses or individuals who have strong personalities, who clash with us. Oftentimes, it's not just the work, it's the people that we have to work alongside. And so what keeps us there in the workplace is that every 2 weeks, come on, everybody, every 2 weeks, we know what happens every 2 weeks, right? There was one guy who said to me once, he's like, "Oh, do we get paid tomorrow?" I said, "Oh, you're living in a different land if you don't actually know when payday is, because most people are actually living for that day. But every 2 weeks, we know we're going to get paid. So we'll maybe forbear and continue to push through certain circumstances and situations because we know that there's going to be something that we're going to get in return. But what happens when we're in the church every 2 weeks? I hear the crickets chirping. Nothing. Nothing. So what is that motivation then? What is that motivation for us to stick with it? What is the motivation for us to actually want to get along with people? What is the motivation? I think when we look at personal relationships, they said that nowadays it actually is more expensive to get divorced than it is to just stay together and pay the mortgage or the rent together. So there's some motivation in some of these other relationships for us to stick with it. But what is the motivation when we're here in church? What is the motivation when it's a friend that we can just maybe say bye to and maybe have another friend and find someone else? What is the motivation? And I'm always going to point back to God's word because this is where my motivation is. I don't want to have God come back and tell me that I didn't do what was in his word and be disappointed in how I lived. And there's so many pointed scriptures in his word about how we are supposed to live together in unity, how we are supposed to connect and communicate with our family members, with our friends, with our romantic partners, how we are supposed to be in the world, how we are supposed to show up in our personal relationships right here in his word. So this is my motivation. I'm not sure what your motivation is. Maybe you're on staff at the church and you do get paid every 2 weeks. I don't know, but I want to say a shout out to my daughter. She just came in. I know most of you don't know I have a daughter. That's my baby girl. Pastor asked me to do a series of these, and I said, Pastor, I'm only giving you 2 because my daughter is getting married in September, and so we have a lot of stuff to plan and a lot of stuff to do. So that's why we're only doing 2 parts for now. It'll be some other parts later. So, hi, baby girl. Love you lots. So that's a bit about who I am and why we are here. And last week, who was here last week? Who remembers the challenge I gave you last week when we started the presentation? I said but before we started, I asked you to get a picture in your mind. Do you remember of the picture of your mind I asked you to get? What I asked you to think about? Does anyone remember? I asked everyone who was here to think about a situation of conflict, a person maybe that they were in conflict with, and I wanted them to consider that as we moved through the lesson, moved through the learning. Today, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. If you don't, you can keep them open, that's okay. But I'm going to ask you to get a different picture in your mind today. I want you to picture yourself standing in the mirror, looking at yourself. That's the picture I want you to get in your mind. Do you have it? Can you see yourself? Because today in our session, we're not going to be focusing on anyone else and how they are behaving or how they're interacting with us. Today we're going to be focusing on moi, me. Any other languages for how to say me? I'm tapped out at 2. But we're going to be focusing on ourselves today. What happens when we're in situations of conflict is oftentimes we want to point the finger. We want to look at the other person. Have you ever heard someone say to you, "You made me mad"? Does Brian have the power to make me mad? Does he have the power to make me anything? Now, are there some things that Brian does that might make me mad? Right? But I have the choice whether or not. Sometimes as a parent with children, when you're just in that place of peace and then they start running amok and doing stuff and you're like, oh, not today. I'm not giving you my peace today. Right? We make those decisions and we say, this is the hard boundary. I'm not giving you this today. And so we have autonomy and control over ourselves. Even though a lot of us were raised to be pretty reckless with ourselves, if we're quite honest. Say what you want to say, do what you want to do, be what you want to be, and that's okay. But I'm telling you that lifestyle is diametrically opposed to what the Word of God says. It is opposed. God talks to us about being measured. He talks to us about being controlled. He talks to us about choosing our words. He talks to us about those things. And we're going to dive deep into that. So this is just my opening reflection. I'm getting ahead of myself. So I promised you a little bit of a recap because we went through a lot last week. And so thinking about what did we learn last week, there was a few takeaways that we're also going to have today. But last week we really did a deep dive into understanding conflict. Understanding those things that are at the heart and at the root of conflict and how conflict grows. I'll show you that model in a second to refresh your memory. Also the factors that contribute to the escalation of conflict. Can some people remember some of those factors that contribute to conflict escalating? It triggers, yep. That's one of those common words. We're going to talk about triggers, right? Everyone's triggered nowadays. Everyone's triggered by everything. I heard something back here. Tone, volume, perception, miscommunication, right? Body language. You ever had someone roll your eyes at you and all of a sudden the conflict escalated way out the roof? It's like, oh no, did you just kiss your teeth? Did you just? No words said, but we're in fight mode. So a lot of those things, tone, volume, the way we say things, the things that trigger us. We think about our childhood, and how we were raised. I don't know if anyone shares this trauma with me. But I was told, what are you crying for? Come on, finish it for me. Yeah, you want me to give you something to cry for? Or what did you get to cry for? So you know what happens to me when I'm in conflict? And Craig will tell you this. I'm going to pick on Craig a lot for those of you who weren't here last week. But I cry in conflict. And the reason why I cry is because I get angry or I get frustrated. But when my husband said to me, he doesn't say this anymore. He's learned, and he wants to stay married. But I remember when my husband said to me, he said, why are you crying? And he might have genuinely wanted to understand why I was crying, but it took me right back to being 6 years old, where my parents are like, do you want me to give you something to cry for? What do you cry? And then you just kind of suck those tears out. So it's funny how things that people say can really just bring you right back to a place in time, and you react from that place. That's why Craig doesn't say it anymore, because I was triggered and he had to live through that trigger. You're fine now, right, babe? He's okay. He's recovered. But also we talked about the impact of unresolved conflict. And all of you here in this room, I'm sure, can look at the landscape of your life and see the impact of unresolved conflict or conflict that didn't go well. I won't ask for a show of hands, but there's people in this room here who have friends that you were once really close with. You might look back at your wedding pictures, see people who stood there with you, and now you don't even talk to them anymore. People that you worked alongside in the church who now you just kind of go your separate ways. A hard one for us is marriages that have broken up. even some of you have made Mississauga Church your home because something happened at another church, in another space, and you were hurt and you were wounded there. And so all of us are dealing with and living with the impacts of unresolved conflict in our lives. And so we learned about what that looks like and how it affects our relationships. And we also talked about God's expectations for us inside of conflict, his expectation around loving, to really love each other. So this is where we talked about last week some of those core components of conflict. My sister here, my same namesake, La-Toya, she shared trigger, right? So we talked about how conflict starts, and it starts usually with some sort of triggering event. And this triggering event can be something light, like what we talked about. Maybe someone made a comment or something that could be perceived as inconsequential to you. And I need to say this again. It might be inconsequential to you, but not to that person. Okay? And that's because of what we talked about, the fact that people come from different places, have different experiences, have different backgrounds. We don't know. I don't have time to say, Layla, what happened to you when you were 2? That makes you feel this way. We don't have that time to engage that way with everybody and know all of the ins and outs of how the way they were raised or the experiences that they have impacted them. And that's why we have to show each other grace and mercy, because we can all be triggered by different things, okay? And so you might say to yourself, well, if I don't know about everyone's background, isn't everyone just going to be triggered? Well, yeah. And part of connection is taking the time to actually learn and understand. Maybe not all the details of that situation, but at least to be mindful and to think, you know what? Something has taken place for this person, and it's a soft spot. I'm not going to touch that anymore. I'm not going to touch that. We can liken it to if you go into a hospital, or you see someone who's recovering from an illness, right? Maybe they've been burned, or they've had, a deep wound. Do you go in and dig your finger into their wound? Nobody in their right mind would do that, right? Unless you're watching some of those movies that Craig likes to watch. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder about his salvation when I see these movies. I'm just like, I don't know if God is pleased. But those movies where they're tormenting someone, we don't do those things if we want to be kind and care about people. Yet we do it emotionally all of the time. We do it emotionally all the time. Oh, I don't know why that bothers you. It's not a big deal. And then we stick our finger in their wound. We stick our finger in their wound. We talked about perception last week as well. And one of the things I said was, it actually does not really matter what happened. Let me say that again. When you step into a situation of conflict, the facts of what happened don't actually really matter. I know that seems crazy because everyone's like, of course, we're trying to get down to the root of things. We want to know what really happened. What actually matters most is the perception of what happened. And so you've been in situations and arguments where, maybe it's 2 people, 2 individuals. You were both there. You were both present. You both experienced the same thing, but you're telling 2 very different stories. Yeah? Right, Craig? He's so quiet today. He knows what's coming. But 2 different stories. But the reality is we don't even know sometimes where the reality is, because I'm perceiving something based on what I'm going through, and he's perceiving something. And so we're going to talk about how we get to close that gap. And then there's our emotions, our needs, and our interests. So if we talk about things like a deep need, let's say you have a deep need to feel belonging, or to feel loved, or to not be abandoned, okay? Maybe people have left in your life. Maybe there's some abandonment issues that you're dealing with. And then you're in a fight with someone, and they walk out of the room and storm away and slam the door, and you don't know where they're gone to. What does that do for you? It's that trigger, right? And it's touching that very deep need that you have to feel like you belong. And I'm going to be very transparent with you guys today. I had a very, very difficult situation in my life where someone left me. Past relationship where someone left in a very devastating way. And so when Craig and I connect and we get married, and his way of dealing with things sometimes is to step away and to give himself a moment to cool off. But every time he took that moment to step away, I was like, there goes the marriage, Lord of mercy. Right? It was done. In my mind, it was done. And then I'm just upset and all of these things happening. And it wasn't until we were able to talk about the fact that this is something that bothers me. This is something that's really hard for me. And he was able to explain to me that he needs to step away because he needs to clear his head. Now I know that he's stepping away and he's coming back. Right? And so he's able to deal with the fact that I have those deep needs and those interests and some of those wounds from the past. But it was only through that communication loop. And then we see our behaviors. So the things that we do because of our perceptions, because of our emotions, because of our needs, because of our interests. And then we see this lash out or the bad behavior, but we don't understand all the things that are happening for you under the surface. And oftentimes, we are speaking to and dealing with your behavior, but we haven't gone through the other steps in the loop. So we talked about this last week. We went up this staircase. This is how conflict escalates. We talked about the fact that conflict is common. It's very normal. It's just reflective of the fact that we're all different. It would take us 1,000,000 years in this room to go through everyone's lived experiences, to understand how everybody's mind works, their opinions, their perspectives, their views. And so conflict itself is neutral. Conflict just shows us that we are created uniquely by God's hand. But it's how we approach conflict that determines whether or not it's going to be a positive or negative outcome. And so we start often at that healthy conflict disagreement stage at the very bottom of that scale. And depending on how we manage the situation, we can move to a situation where instead of talking about the problem, we're talking about each other. For those of you who were here last week, I had my brother Steve. He's not here this week. Brother Steve, he was my victim last week. And we walked through this scale together and talked about, instead of talking about our fundraising issue, we started talking about each other and calling each other names. Things like, you're lazy, or, people like you do these things, or you're too much. Whatever those words are, we turned it into us versus them. And if we can't get that problem back into our view, we move up to triangulation. And triangulation is where we don't talk to each other, we talk about each other. Oh, I see the blank stares like we've never done this before. But where we talk about each other. So that's where I start talking about Craig to someone else. That's where I create the triangle. And how we avoid triangulation is when I cut out that middle person and have the conversation with Craig. And one of the things we talked about, the fact that we're not doing, is we are not talking to each other anymore. We're live streaming, so I have to be careful what I say about work, because I want to get that paycheck every 2 weeks, if you know what I'm saying. But it's surprising to me that I work with officers. And you know the presence that a police officer carries when they're wearing their vest and their duty belt and everything like that. I was talking to someone one day, and they were telling me about some of the issues that they were dealing with a particular employee. So they're telling me all the issues, long-standing issues. So I said to them, okay, so what did the first conversation look like? Like, what did that first conversation? Tell me a little bit about that. Crickets. Crickets chirping. You know why? There was no conversation. There was no conversation. But they brought the issue to me to help resolve this conflict, but they didn't actually even talk to the person yet. And that is what I think is probably one of the hearts of the issues that we have at hand is, number one, that we're not talking to each other, we're talking about each other. And number two, when we are brave enough to have that conversation, we are not engaging in a kind and respectful way. Okay? So if we don't talk to each other, we talk about each other, we see camps forming, and we move up to something called the tipping point. And this is where we stop seeing the humanity of each other. So when we're at tipping point, you could come with the best idea ever. What's your name, sir? Paul. See, Brother Steve's not here, so I'm going to bug on Paul today. So Paul and I are in conflict, okay? And now we're at the stage where we're talking about each other. We're not getting onto the same page. Now Paul comes and he has this great idea to take our church committee to the next level. He's got this brilliant idea that's going to make us 100% successful. This is the great idea that we've been looking for. And what do? I'm not interested. I don't care what idea Paul has. It came from Paul. I don't want it. And you laugh, but I'm sure some of you have seen people go up to pray, collect an offering, deliver a word, and you're not even interested in hearing what they have to say. In your mind, you're thinking, look at them. You're not interested. You're not receiving anything. God himself could have dropped that word in their spirit and speaking to you, and you're not interested. And that's where tipping point is. And if we don't deal with our conflict at tipping point, we're moving into entrenchment. And that's where we see people at the highest risk of things like violence, violent behavior, threats, those types of things. And in church, that's where you pack up your bags and you move your membership. First reading, second reading. And you change your membership to another church because I'm not dealing with it anymore. People leave. And it's actually, okay, fine if you want to leave and go to another church, but what unfortunately happens in a lot of cases is people walk away from God because they don't see that difference between the conflict, the person, and the relationship. Okay? So that's just a recap because I think it's really, really important for those of you who weren't here or didn't see last week to understand what we talked about. So today we have a few different objectives. We are going to talk about our cultural background. Our cultural background. It's really important in how we deal with conflict. And I can't teach this in some certain spaces, but we're going to talk about not only our cultural background from a world perspective, because we are all in Ontario, where everybody is different, and we have to deal with a lot of different cultures. But then we also come into situations like this where we are in a church or we are in a setting, a friend group, where culturally we're similar. We might not all be from exactly the same place, but we're similar. And what does that mean for how we deal with conflict? Also, thinking about who we are as children, our childhoods, our personalities, our communication styles in conflict. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to really look at how do we create a collaborative environment where conflict can actually lead to better outcomes. Last week, we talked about the fact that conflict is an opportunity if we want it to be an opportunity. And the reason I can tell you that completely is because I've seen any one of my close relationships where I've had an issue of conflict and we have addressed it and dealt with it appropriately and moved forward and carried on with the relationship, that we're actually closer. We're actually closer. And I say that if we've dealt with it appropriately, because if I use the example of marriage, and I say, well, we're having conflict all the time and we're just keep moving forward. If we're not dealing with it, that actually can erode the fabric of that relationship. And that's where people get to a point where they're like, I'm over this. But if we're able to resolve and move through that and come to a place of agreement, doesn't mean I'm always getting my way, but if we can come to a place of agreement and move forward and continue to build that trust, we can have strong relationships. I was at my uncle-in-law's funeral. I guess it was over a year now. We lost him. And I was so moved by the fact that, how long had Uncle been married for? 56 years? 56 years, Lean, I think? Yeah, I think it's 56 years. And I was like, what does it take to be married to someone for like half a century? And I thought, well, it takes a lot of humility, a lot of patience, a lot of grace, a lot of forgiveness, a lot of long-suffering. Oh, sounds like 1 Corinthians 13, what God actually tells us all to do, not just at weddings, but he tells us all to do. That's what it takes. And when you think about the fabric of that relationship and how strong that is, when you continue to do these things, it makes a difference. And then lastly, we're going to identify and explain God's expectations for conflict resolution. So are we ready? Okay. I'm interested in your questions. I want to hear your feedback. If there's anything that I'm sharing that you have a question on, don't wait till the end. You can throw your hand up and we'll talk about it. I want to start with conflict communication styles. Can everyone see that? Yeah? Okay. So this is a model by Thomas Kilman. And this model speaks to how we communicate in conflict. Okay? In conflict, how we communicate. And if you look at the left axis where it says assertive, do you see where it says assertive there on the left side? That means care and concern for yourself. Or how assertive you are going to be in a particular situation of conflict. And at the bottom, I know the rostrum is in the way there, but at the bottom, we see cooperative. That can also be exchanged with care or concern for yourself. So if we're in the top left-hand quadrant of this model where it says competing, just to explain, that means that you're highly assertive, very low in your cooperation with other people, or in other words, your care and concern for yourself is high, and your care and concern for others is low. Some of you are already, oh, thank you. Some of you are already putting some of the pieces together. Now, remember what I said at the beginning. As we're going through our session today, we're not looking at anybody else here. And the people are going to pop up for you as we talk about these conflict communication styles. You're going to see people who fit in these boxes. But I'm asking you to see where you fit. Who are you in conflict? Because this is the only person that you have agency and control to actually change, is yourself. So if we start in that top left box there, competing. Competing as a communication style is when you have to win. My way or the highway. I'm going to ask you, when do you think it would actually be a good situation to use this type of style? I have to win. I don't have any time to hear what you have to say. My way is going to be the way today. Any situation where this is a good, there better be a good one because people are using this one a lot. What did you say? Anyone? Where there's danger. Absolutely. Right? Your child's running into the road. Is this the time to be like, Sally, do you feel like coming back to the curb? Not a good time. Okay? My way or the highway. Any other situation? Time. Appointment, schedule, like, you know, if the doctor is expecting you for your surgery at such and such a time, this isn't the time for us to collaborate and figure out a middle ground. The doctor is available to operate. I will be there in my little backless robe waiting. So we have situations where it's okay to compete in conflict. It's okay to compete. I think about work. I think about same thing in terms we talk about time, deadlines. I love to be on time. So when I see that something's going off the rails, I'm like, oh. When we have deadlines, we have to meet that deadline. If we're a parent, I mean, back in the day when I was parenting, and Dominique's not going to smile too hard with this, but, you know, you and me aren't friends, right? I know now we're giving our kids a lot more latitude where, you know, we're letting them have voices, which is nice. I just didn't have one when I was growing up. I didn't have a voice. But as a parent, there's times where we do have to compete and just let kids know. Do you know when it's not a good time to be competitive in conflict? When you're La-Toya's husband. Yes, Craig. Right, Craig? So to tell you a little bit about my husband, he played football for like all of his life, probably started at 11 and played football for many, many years. He finally retired playing football when I couldn't afford to buy Voltaren in bulk at Costco anymore. And I said, enough is enough. Like, just rest yourself. Maybe you can ref or something. But he's highly competitive. Highly competitive. We play a lot of games as a family. So we've got the kids and we play board games and stuff. And I remember when our little Grayson, the child couldn't have been any more than 5 or 6. And Craig was creaming that boy in Connect 4, game after game after game. I said, let the boy, no, he has to learn. He has to learn. He's highly competitive. So when we come into conflict, Craig drives high in competing. And I want you to stick a pin in that because I'm going to explain something about our relationship and things that we've had to do. So remember that Craig used to be in that box. Now, we move down to avoiding. So this is where we are low on the assertive scale. So we're not assertive. We are also low on cooperation or low on care and concern for others and low on care and concern for ourselves. So we're just low, okay? When we think of avoiding in conflict, tell me when you should avoid a conflict. Danger, okay, the same example. Tell me a little more about that, Pastor. Can we give Pastor the mic?
I'm saying, I'm driving down the motorway, and I'm not going to say I drive fast, but I'm driving down the motorway. And something flares up. And I want to get off the motorway. And I'm distance away from the next exit. So it's not a time for conflict because I'm not going to think straight at all.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. So danger, not a good time for conflict when I'm driving on the highway. That's a good one, Pastor. That's a good time to avoid.
I would say in the middle of a robbery. If something's going down, you don't want to become...
That's really good. I've never heard that one before, and I work with police. But that's really good. In the middle of a robbery is not the time, right, to try to figure things out. Like, we've got to... maybe, especially if you're not the cop. If you're just there to buy a pack of gum, this is not the time to try to compete. I see a couple of hands here. I just want to make sure you get a mic so we can hear you. Brother Lightbody first, and then.
So when you're angry.
When you're hot, I'm telling you, you can feel it. You feel the heat rising in yourself, and you know, like, this is not a good time. So we're going to avoid this. Okay, I'm going to just one more person, and then I'll let you go.
When your life is at risk.
Yeah, when your life is at risk. Similar to the robbery situation, right?
When you're in the presence of your children.
How many of us are actually do that? I think if everyone did that, some of us wouldn't be talking about our childhood trauma in the room, right? But there's so many reasons why avoiding conflict can actually be a good thing. But when it's not a good thing, is number one, when we avoid for all of those situations, but never come back. Never come back to it. So your emotions are high. You're angry. You're upset. I can't have this conversation right now. I'm just going to step away from this. But you know what happens most often? We step away from it and we never come back to it. And so some of us have grown up in homes where that's what we've seen. I see it on Instagram. I feel like, my gosh, Instagram makes me feel like other people were living my life. But you see it on Instagram where it's like there's a reel where it's like a West Indian parent's way of, resolving the conflict is to be like, so you're hungry? And they just give you a meal and move on. Right? And then everything's fine. But is it? So we've avoided the conflict, but we haven't actually come back to the thing that caused that particular issue. And so sometimes we avoid because we're averse to conflict. We're not just angry. We don't like conflict. And none of us really do, but we don't like it, so we stay away from conflict. And I can tell you, I said this last week, and Pastor talked about, drinking isn't such a great thing today, but I'm going to use this analogy again. Conflict is not like fine wine. They say the longer you age that fine wine, the better it is. Conflict isn't like that. So if we use avoiding as a conflict communication style, we need to be mindful that we loop back around at the appropriate time. One of the things I see, particularly at work, or I see in sometimes friendship situations as well, is we avoid conflict. We never tell the person what's going on, but the problem continues to persist. So and then we're frustrated, right? We're angry, we're upset. Like, this is the 12th time Keith did this thing to me. Well, did you ever tell him? Did you ever tell him? I have managers who are like, this person's performing poorly and blah, 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 blah. But you have never actually dug in and had the important conversation that you need to have about the thing. And those conversations don't always look great. Sometimes you got to hash things out, but you can't avoid forever. And then we move into accommodation. Now, remember, I told you a little bit about my business. I told you that Craig was high in competing. I am a recovering accommodator. You can clap for me. Yes, I'm in recovery. I don't know if accommodators ever fully, completely recover, but I'm in recovery. I'm in process. And so accommodating in conflict, this is where you say, it's okay. You take the win. You take the win. And why do you think people accommodate in conflict? Peace? So they can move on? They don't want to look bad? Yep. So many reasons why we accommodate. Often, I can say for myself as a recovering accommodator, is I valued the relationship more than I valued that particular issue. And if we're honest, sometimes we're not actually in conflict about the big, deep issues of life. Sometimes it's little foolishness that get us in this conflict loop. And so in moments of conflict with my competitive husband, I'm just like, it's fine. It's okay. I love you, and the Lord tells me that I just need to lean in and love you with all my heart, and so I'm going to forgive you and move on. Notice I had to forgive him. It's not the other way around. Just kidding. But that's how I leaned into things. And so what starts to happen now is the competitor is getting the wins. They're getting the wins. And I caution you people who see yourself in that competing box. If you see yourself in that competing box and you are winning all the arguments, you are taking all the wins, you are upsetting the people in your life. Someone said, oh man. And sometimes very deeply, very deeply. As a recovering accommodator, I laugh and I crack jokes about Craig. This isn't just about Craig. This is about my entire life. When you accommodate in conflict for your entire life and you give people the wins, what starts to happen to you? You get resentful. That's the word. You get resentful. You lose yourself. You don't even know what matters, what's important, your voice. You lose confidence. You distance, yep. It becomes an expectation. So now people are looking at you because, oh yeah, she's so agreeable. And then you have to live up to the expectation, but meanwhile that resentment is building. And what happens when you feel like a doormat? I'll tell you. You drive very high into super competitiveness. And that's where you lose it. No one was harmed, I don't think, in me losing it. But what it was more of this internal thing for me where it was like, no, I have to get some wins. And I don't think it was those words in my head, but it was like, no, enough. And it was across my whole life where I thought, no more. So be mindful of the accommodators in your life because they make your life feel great because you're like, I'm getting the wins. But they will snap. Yes.
Is that a point where someone would say, I'm getting my power back?
Those are some of the words that might have very well been used. I'm taking my power back. We see people who really take that autonomy, and now they sometimes become very aggressive, and they show up differently than how they normally show up, so people are not really sure what to do with them at this point because they've always been agreeable. And then we move into collaboration. So this is where cooperation is high, your assertiveness is high, so that means your care for others is high, your care for yourself is high. Okay? I see a hand there. Where's the other mic? Oh, you got it? I'm closer. It's okay.
I just wanted to ask a question before you moved on.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The blame game, where somebody has to have a scapegoat to put it onto somebody else. Blaming you for something that it's not your fault. It couldn't be helped. But they're always looking for a scapegoat to blame someone. It's you why your mother got sick and had to go to the hospital or something like that.
Yeah, and I think not necessarily in the context of conflict communication styles, but I think that those are some of the conflict triggers and some of those things that start conflict and cause conflict to escalate. When we don't step back and take accountability for things, and that's where we started and said, how can you look at yourself? How can you look at yourself? Rather than pointing the finger and blaming others. And I don't know about you, but when someone puts a blame on me or tries to blame me or shame me for something, that doesn't make me open for a conversation. So it's not helpful. But yeah, we have a lot of that where people want to blame. And I think the responsibility is on both sides. So we can't be blaming people for everything. We have to take accountability. I think about when you're a child. You're raised by your parents in the best way that they know how to, right? And every child, I always say to Craig, I'm like, no matter how well we raise these children, they're going to grow up and need some therapy. Don't nod too hard on that. But we're doing the best that we can. When you grow into an adult, you can no longer look back and keep blaming your parents. There are some things that you can look at your parents and say, I understand that that's what they did because that's where they were at that point or that's what they had. When you become an adult, you realize this thing is not easy, actually. And I know for me, when I looked back at and started to talk to my parents and understand, like, oh, my word, you were 20, how much when you did that thing? In a brand new country, experiencing racism for the first time, trying to go back, like all of these different things. And when I look at how they were raised, that's where my grace comes in for my parents. And I cannot point the finger and say, they did. Now I stand in the truth of the fact that I'm an adult and I make the decisions now. So I take accountability for the direction that my life is going to go. Okay? There's a lot of things in life that people will do that will cause us harm, that will hurt us, and I don't want to minimize the trauma. I don't want to minimize those deep wounds that you've experienced from people, but there is still a level of accountability and responsibility that we have to stand up and move forward. And blaming people for where we are at is not helpful. Not helpful in forgiving them, not helpful in us moving forward. I hope I answered. Did that help?
It's all about our communication style and how we see ourselves. But people see us differently, right? So we may think that we are collaborating, but we're actually accommodating. Or we could be accommodating, but we're actually avoiding. You know, how do we deal with that conflict?
That's a really good question. I think for that one, I think we have to dig deep into the people around us. Because if I think I'm collaborating and my partner keeps telling me you're avoiding, something's off. There's some dissonance there. And my perception is maybe different from reality. Maybe we need to actually understand what each thing is. Maybe I need to actually lean into curiosity and understand, why do you think that I'm avoiding? And hear some of their examples. One of the big things in conflict is just being open. Just being open, just having some humility to just listen to even the hard things. So to hear, why do you think that? Why do you say that? And then hopefully your partner can hear you and think, well, this is why I think this, or these are the situations, and you kind of hash it out and talk through that. And if it's not your partner, then whatever relationship it is, I'm going to say it in this room and say it proud in a room full of people who maybe share a similar background to me, that there is value in therapy. There is value in talking to professionals about your challenges. And I know that there's some internal gasps happening because we're taught to not talk about our issues. I'm going to talk a little bit about culture and how we put on a good face. But we're broken inside, and we don't have the tools and the skills. So you're sick, you go to a doctor because you don't know anything about your bone structure and why you might need a cast or why you need some anti-inflammatory medications or whatever the case may be. You trust that doctor, but when we talk about our issues, we want to think, well, I know it all and I don't need to talk to anyone. It's actually not helpful. Yes, therapy and Jesus go hand in hand. Honestly. So I'll say that there. So we move through collaborating, and so collaborating is really good when you want to think about the fact that everybody gets a win in collaboration. Okay, and so collaboration, we more see those sort of things like, okay, all right, Craig, we want to go on a trip. Like, where should we go? Well, let's ask the kids, what do they want to see? And we can all have this conversation. That's actually not a good example because they're going wherever we say they're going. But, we might want to get some ideas about where do we want to go, maybe as a couple, and we can collaborate and decide, well, maybe going to Turkey's too far, and maybe we don't want to go here, but we'll go someplace in the middle. That gives us a little bit of the feel of what we're looking for. Okay, so that's collaboration. And I can say, if you can find those moments in your life where you can collaborate with people, this is where you gain a lot of trust. If you are competing, avoiding in situations where you can just collaborate, you are missing some really beautiful moments in life. Some really, really beautiful moments, because we're here with people who have other views, and we don't have to just do things the way we want to do things. Sometimes you might just be that bully who's like, no, this is where we're going, or this is what we're doing. This is what we're eating tonight. This is what I feel like. But does it really matter if you go to Mr. Jerk or Daddy's Jerk? Can we just give someone else the decision? Just have jerk. You know what I'm saying? So collaborating. And then we go into the middle where it's compromising. And compromising is something we talk about a lot, having to compromise. Compromising is very hard because this is where it's lose-lose. Lose-lose. Okay? So you're not getting the initial thing you wanted. I'm not getting the initial thing I wanted. Neither of us are perfectly satisfied, but we're giving up something. And sometimes you'll see compromise usually show up in where I'm going to give something now to you in the hopes that the next time you'll give me something. So I want to go to Bora Bora. True story. And Craig wants to go on an Alaskan cruise. So I say, fine. We'll go to Alaska this time because I think Alaska's beautiful too. I'm like, we'll go to Alaska this time. But on our next trip, get your Speedo ready because we're going to be going to Bora Bora. And you guys were frightened. I would never let Craig wear a Speedo in public. So, but that's the compromise, right? So if you're compromising and you're giving to someone, you have to remember that you actually owe them something the next time. I've given this to you. You also have to bring it back and give me a win as well. Okay, so that's our conflict communication styles. And this can be a really powerful tool in terms of not just knowing yourself. I told you to look at yourself, but also in understanding others. I can tell you that if you know someone that you are close with and they are competitive and you have an issue of conflict, you now have the ability to determine how you are going to go into that conversation. Because I know that you want to win. So how can I start a conversation with someone who wants to win? Is there a little something I can give? Is there a little something where I can meet them where they're at a little bit, give them a little something? Is there something that I can say that starts the conversation off on a neutral ground and sort of neutralizes that competitiveness? But if I come in hot with someone who's a competitor, we're burning down the house. We're burning down the house. And I can also look at, that person who's the accommodator. It feels good because I know they're going to give me the win, but I also have to recognize that that person deserves some care. And so how do I say, listen, I'm noticing that on our committee, you're not saying anything, like you're always going this direction, but your voice is important. And I really want to hear what you have to say. Like, what are your thoughts?
Hi, good evening. So just to step back a little bit, you mentioned about compromise, that in a compromise situation, it's a lose-lose. No one actually wins. And you gave your example that in compromising, you give up what you want for now in hope of possibly delayed gratification later on because you're hoping the other person will also give up what they want so that, they can be satisfied. But in a case where, let's say, for instance, he wants a sports car. He wants the speed. He wants, something small. But you want a truck. You want the space. But then you decide, okay, we don't want to go for a truck. We're not going to buy a sports car. But let's get an SUV. It's not quite big. It's also probably not as fast. But it's still, the SUV may be faster than the truck, but bigger than the car. So we both decide, okay, I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of what I would want, my ideal desire, so that I still get a little bit of what I want. So half gratification. So would you still see that as a lose-lose?
That's a great question. I would see that more as actually a blend between collaborating and compromising. Because you're coming together to bring your ideas to the table and what is it that you want? Can we check off some boxes for you? Can we check off some boxes for me? And so you are compromising because you're not getting the sports car, and I'm compromising because I'm not getting that. But we have come together with a collaborative decision together on that. When I think about pure compromise, I think about the fact that you get the sports car. Like, you get that sports car. But next year when you get that bonus, I'm getting my truck. Like, I look at it that way. Like, I see, like, you're letting that person, yes, I'm going to let go of what I want in this moment. But the real truth of compromise as well is that it's not always even like that in relationships. And relationships aren't tit for tat. So there's going to be some things where most likely in compromise, I'm just going to have to let go of something. Maybe I can say this because I love my in-laws. Maybe, I don't like my in-laws, and I don't want to go to, Christmas with my in-laws. Like, I'd rather just have Christmas in my home by myself with nobody there. But that's something that matters to my partner. That's something that really matters to my partner. It matters to my in-laws. I know it's going to cause a big fuss, a big kerfuffle. You guys know I love you. But it's going to cause a big thing. So I'm going to compromise. And I'm going to say, fine, Boxing Day then, I'm going to have my day, but I'm going to let you have Christmas, and we're going to do it with your family. And I'm not necessarily going to get something in return that is of like kind. But I think if you're in a relationship where you are compromising, then that person has to kind of almost remember that, you know what, you gave me Christmas. And I know that was tough for you, so I'm going to do X, Y, Z for you, even though that's something that I'm not really interested in. Is that helpful?
So that person should remember. Okay.
I feel like this is a loaded question.
And you do it several times, compromise, because you want to get along. You want them to be happy. But there comes a point where maybe you have to remind them. And then they would say something like, do you have to go there? Is that something you have to remind me about? But sometimes you have to remind. Is that the way to approach it?
Telling you guys are going to give me these loaded questions, I feel like. We have to talk. We have to talk. And if you feel like you are doing all of the compromising and you need the balance to swing in another direction, then I encourage you to have the conversation. The way we have that conversation is going to be very key. It's going to be very key because it's not just a matter of, I gave you all of this, so you should give me this. My husband has some wisdom. You want to speak to that? Oh, another. I thought he was going to speak to that. So I think we just need to be mindful about the how of that conversation. But I do think that even in another, like if a conflict comes up and you notice that you've compromised a few times, then I think it's actually fair to say, you know what, I've given, and I'm going to ask you this time to come. Can you give me? Can you come on this side and just see things from my perspective? Because I've given. I think that's fair.
And I was going to say something to in that realm, and I think sometimes when you have that question, it can't come at the time when that person or your person are asking. So I've given. Now you're coming to me and you want something, but I'm always the one that's having to give in. That's probably not the time that conversation should happen. If you can find, okay, I've given on a regular day. You're watching TV, you're going for a nice walk in the park. It's like, you know what? This has been on my mind. And then you can have a conversation. Like, I've recognized that a lot of times I give in and I give you the things that you're looking for. But there's a lot of times I find that I'm actually having to push aside the things that are important to me. I like to be able to talk about that, and see what we can do to keep. It's not like it's a competition, but I just kind of want it to be a little bit more even. What can we do towards, getting to that place? That's a better time as opposed to in the midst of, I want this. Well, you want something else again? Like, I'm always the one. Like, that's not the time, right? And that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I think that's the trigger for us, and that's where we spiral into conflict. And I think I would also challenge, that's what I would say for you. For the individual who is getting the compromise all the time, the question that I have is, when someone you're in a relationship with expresses displeasure or something that they're not okay with, why is that such a tough thing for us to take in? Like, why is it so tough for me to tell you that I need something, or I'm not getting something that I'm hoping for. Why is it so difficult for us to hear and receive that?
It could be because we have the inability, or we feel within ourselves that we can't give that, what they're desiring or requesting of us, and then in a sense we end up getting our back up. We just don't have it to give. It could be. I'm just a thought.
So capacity, or maybe you don't have the, it's not in your bent maybe to give that thing. You go ahead. My baby girl, everyone, shut up.
Hello, Mother. I would say taking it personally, like you take that as a personal attack against you and your character, or maybe your lack of ability to provide something that you maybe thought you were providing, and you're not necessarily just taking the issue for what it is on its own and hearing what the person has to say to you.
Yep. Yep. We have someone else here? Go ahead.
What about the wife paying the monthly bills all the while and the husband doesn't want to pay any of it?
The wife paying the bills and the husband doesn't want to? Oh, my darling, we could be here all night long with that question. We need a parking lot for that question. It's a very specific one, but I think it's also about the roles, right? And I think roles in all of our relationships matter. Roles and expectations. And I'm not gonna sit necessarily on marriage for that, because I think that even shows up in our friendship relationships. So you have a friend, and you think that having a friend means we should talk 6 times a week, right? You should call me on your drive home every day, or whatever the case might be. And then we should be going out and doing X, Y, Z. And when you're not able and you don't have the capacity, there's some disappointment there. So we need to have conversations about what are our expectations of each other. And is that a reasonable ask? Is that something I'm able to do? To set the boundaries. If we're looking at husbands and wives, like, these are big conversations that sometimes I don't even think husbands and wives should just be having by themselves. I think sitting down with someone who can support you in that conversation, who is neutral, can really help deal with whatever those issues are at play that are happening there. I'm trying to answer, but not really answer, because your question's really deep. But I think we could talk a little bit more about that later. Go ahead.
What about if you're compromising with the person because of the situation both of you are in, but the person wants you to compromise with them all the time, but when they're to compromise with you, they actually, it's not that they can't, but just that they don't want to. So they're asking you to change, like to make yourself open and available and compromise for their situation, and it's okay for them, but they're not willing to compromise for you because they want you to always adhere or be or do what they want you to do, but they're saying that they're not giving you the time of day.
So I think, just also in interest of time, like, I think we all have a lot of very individual issues, very specific issues that I don't know that we can really answer fully in this type of setting. But I think I go back to what I was sharing before around compromise. It's having those conversations to say, this is where I'm not feeling that you're coming on side with me. If you're at a stalemate, again, and I'm not here to just advertise counseling, but I'm here to say that there are people who are equipped. Just like I'm equipped to have this conversation with everyone, there are people who are equipped to support people who are entrenched in difficult issues like that to really move through. So that's where we're going to, that's what I'll say about that. Go ahead.
Also, a parallel scenario could be like, let's say you go for a job, and then a potential interviewer asks you, can you tell me some weakness about yourself? Like, most of us in the room here will never be able to tell a weakness about ourselves because we are kind of sheltered. So we see ourselves more so as self-righteous. We see ourselves as this perfect bubble. So when someone come about and like, to critique us of something that we think we are perfect on, and they see as negative, then we start putting it up our shelves, and the defensive mechanism kicks in. So I think it's all that self-righteous aspect of ourselves.
Yep. And you lead me directly into cultural considerations. Because sometimes it's how we're raised, okay? My dad, he always taught me, he used to say, you don't dress and judge. So basically he was telling me about my clothes, but I took this very, very deeply inside of me because of other reasons. So the things you wear around the house, you don't wear that when you go outside, right? And this principle showed up in my life in many different ways where I was taught that when I'm outside, I have to put on. I have to be this thing. And not, in terms of being false or anything like that, but you just don't just be any kind of way when you're outside. And I think there are things that we are raised that help to create these walls for us so that we are not able to receive criticism well. We're not able to receive even constructive feedback well. That is one question that we should all be able to ask rapidly. If someone says, what is your weakness? You should be able to drop 3 very quickly. 3 of your weaknesses, 3 of the things that maybe are your kryptonite, 3 of the things that you struggle with. Why don't we know those things? But we could tell you a list of 10 of sister so-and-so of her weaknesses. But we don't know about ourselves. And that's why today, I said at the beginning, we're going to look at ourselves. We have to look at ourselves. And we have to see how we're being experienced and how we're impacting the people around us. We are receiving feedback and signals every single day from the people around us. And those are messages that are telling us how people are experiencing you in this world. And you have some responsibility and accountability around what you do with those messages. So when we look at culture and conflict, this is on a broad scale. When we look at how different cultures communicate across the world, we think about communication styles in terms of cultures. There's high context and low context. So an example of a high context communication culture is like Japan, China, Korea, Arab nations, and some like indigenous cultures. And this concept is where Edward T. Hall, he's an anthropologist, he did a lot of work around how we communicate culturally, and some of his stuff is really, really fascinating. But in high context cultures, your communication relies a lot on nonverbal cues. So I've seen certain things culturally, like you go to a place like some countries where they bow, or you don't do certain things, like you don't shake a hand, or there's a lot of non-verbal cues in these types of cultures. Conflict is addressed indirectly, indirectly, and that also helps to preserve that sort of harmony. So you'll see like a disagreement might be expressed through silence. So you say something to me that I'm not okay with, I actually won't respond. That's how a high context communication culture will deal with. If we think about low context cultures like us, Canada, the US, places like Germany, it's very direct. Okay? Very explicit verbal communication. You have to address things openly and assertively. Can we see what the problem is now when we're dealing with some different cultures and how we manage those things? There's also something called that power distance. So when we think about the power distance, I think Donald, we talked about this. I think we were talking about it last week in the context of elders, which we'll get to. But the power distance, so you see high power distance cultures like India, the Philippines, some African nations, and that's where hierarchy is respected and authority figures are rarely challenged. Okay? I did some work with someone the other day who came from, I believe it was Zimbabwe. And I basically told them, well, you need to assertively respond to so-and-so and so-and-so. Oh, no, I would never do that. Like, it was actually disrespectful culturally for them to do that. And my response was, well, it's tough because you're in Canada now. And the way that we do things here means that some of those things you actually have to shed. If you actually want to be successful here, I think those values are deeply important to this person and they're valuable. But when you're in a different environment, you have to understand the context with which we communicate and really consider that. And I know there was a real big challenge to this person in that situation, but that's an example of that power distance. So in countries like Sweden or Australia, they encourage that dialogue. It's not anything uncommon to like challenge or to address things collaboratively, regardless of what your status is. There's something called individualism versus collectivism. And so our culture, the UK, where our pastor's from, the US, those are considered individualistic cultures. And those are cultures where we say we value those words like personal autonomy, self-expression, those freedom of speech. I get to say things, my individual rights and freedoms. And conflict isn't always seen as a bad thing. It's just a part of how it is we need to move. But then collectivist cultures like Japan and India and China and a lot of Middle Eastern countries, they emphasize group harmony. Okay? So loyalty, interdependence. And conflict is often suppressed in these types of nations. And again, please, I know I'm using this in general terms, so this doesn't apply to every single individual, and this is not, a sweeping statement so that we can say people from this country are like this. This is just a generalized view of how we focus on things differently. So conflict is often suppressed or redirected to maintain relationships. So that sounds to me like a little bit of that accommodation, avoidance piece on a cultural stage, okay? And then I told you we're going to talk a little bit about face and honor. You see the face up there. So there are some cultures, and you might hear yourself here, like East Asia, the Middle East, the Caribbean, Africa. Maintaining dignity, reputation, and social standing is paramount. So this, Keith, is where your question brought this into view for me, because I'm thinking about the fact that this is cultural for us, that my dignity matters, and how, we hear all the time, like, they disrespected me, right? Because it's our dignity, it's our honor, it's saving face for us is high on that value scale. Okay, so you see conflict resolution strategies aim to often avoid that sort of shame or public embarrassment, which I kind of find interesting, because in my experience with my people, oftentimes we shame and embarrass people a lot. Yet culturally, we uphold this thing. So there's some dissonance there. Apologies are often offered indirectly. So remember I told you the apology was, are you hungry? That's the apology that you're going to get. And blame is diffused. So sometimes you'll tell someone about themselves or something that they did to upset you. They don't take that accountability and accept that responsibility. They'll have to say, well, yeah, we were both wrong, instead of just standing in the fact that they did something and holding on to that. But it's all about preserving that face and that honor. So in honor-based cultures, you can also see these cultures defending their family reputation and leading to very emotional responses. So if you say something about someone's child or about someone who's close to them in an honor-based culture, problems. Like it's gone. Like straight up that ladder, all the way over the cliff, out of entrenchment. And then we look at emotional expression. So there's emotionally restrained cultures. So cultures like Finland, Ethiopia, they value self-control and emotional moderation. So they'll be calm and quiet negotiation, maybe avoidance. And then we see emotionally expressive cultures. Does anyone want to offer a emotionally expressive culture? Italy? I heard Jamaica. Yes. I saw a post the other day. Pastor, I don't live on social media. I know I've used a lot of examples, especially after a sermon today. But I saw a post the other day where it was like, why do Jamaicans say it's such a nice thing, but they say it so rough, you know? Brother Campbell, me like that shirt there. It nice. But it sounds like you're angry. We're very emotionally expressive people, right? Very emotionally. What? It looked tough. Yeah, we use those types of words too, right? Yeah, exactly. And so we view emotional expression as being honest. Honest. So I remember last week, Mel, I think you said that greeting, that lovely greeting where, oh, you look fat. And Mel educated us last week and said, that's actually not a greeting. That's actually not a nice thing to say. But because we're being honest, that's how we communicate and we are expressive. And we don't think that that's hostile. But then you brought your kids to this country where we look and we're like, it actually is. That's kind of hostile, right? And then we can see conflict avoidance versus confrontation. So we talked about that before, and there's a difference there. And then we talked about time. So monochromatic cultures. There are some cultures where we don't play about time. If we said the session's starting at 3 o'clock, then we're starting at 3 o'clock. And if you come at 4 o'clock, the session's done. You missed it. Nobody waited for you. They value punctuality, schedules, efficiency. And then there's polychronic cultures. So that's like Latin America, West Africa, the Caribbean. I can tell you a conflict trigger for me was when I was younger going to Jamaica and I went to the bank. And I had somewhere to go after the bank. Nobody told me, don't make any plans if you're going to the bank in Jamaica. I am telling you, I think that girl filed every nail. She had a little conversation, and finally when she was ready, she said next. I was like, I missed the country bus that I needed to take. It was just a mess. But they were in no hurry. And there can be some comfort in that when we're moving in a fast-paced environment, but it can create some dissonance. When you're not worried about time. Also, that time can equate to how we manage that conflict, right? So conflict management can be more slow and relational. There's no urgency necessarily to deal with it. Okay? And then obviously there's that role of religion and tradition. If we look at culturally across the landscape, we can see faiths like Islam. They may involve principles of justice and community arbitration. There's indigenous communities and African traditions where we do things like circle mediations and circle conversations. And then there's spiritual meditation, or like we do prayer in our culture. So all of these play a factor in how we deal with conflict. I want to zoom in, though, on African and Caribbean culture because of who we are. So when we think about our culture, and I want us to consider this in how you manage conflict and how you've been raised and what you grew up around and what you understand. And forgive me if you're not from an African or Caribbean culture, but I've sat through a lot of sessions in my life where I had to listen to a lot of content that did not speak to me culturally. So I'm going to ask anyone who this doesn't speak to culturally to just take a moment and sit in the space, because our people need to understand this. So we have an emphasis on community and collectivism, which we talked about before, okay? So the the extended family, it plays a central role in resolving issues. So remember when I talked about triangulation before, and it's like we talk about people? We often use this, collectivism and community, and we pretend like this is how we're resolving stuff. So we triangulate. But what we do is, I have a problem with Donald, but I've called my sister Valine, I've called my sister Marilyn, I've spoken to my daughter, I've spoken to Sue, I've spoken to everybody but him. And maybe even someone is emboldened enough. Valine comes to Donald at church and says, I was talking to my sister-in-law and she's not happy with you. These are the types of ways that we try to resolve conflict based on who we are as a culture. And it's not effective. It's not effective. What I do love about the real heart of collectivism is that we recognize that culture affects everybody, that conflict affects everybody. So if I'm in conflict with Craig, all of our kids are affected. And our siblings are probably affected. Because remember, we go for Christmas and we do all these different things. Like, it has this ripple effect. So how do we get the support of our community without triangulating? And does our community support us when I come to call Sue or I come to call Valine? Do they support me to say, you know what, we're backing you, we're here, we're going to pray you up and support you? How do you think you should have this conversation with Donald? And support me to have that conversation directly with him. And when I have the conversation with Donald and it doesn't go well and I come back and they help me and say, okay, well, what's the next step? What can we do now? Do you want me to have a conversation? Do you want us, the three of us, to have a conversation? Like, that's the true heart of where collectivism should be, as opposed to polarizing and triangulating and creating more kerfuffle amongst each other. There's also the role of elders and authority figures, and this is what we talked about, Donald, where I think last week Donald asked a question where, should the youth not just respect our elders, right? Should we not? I know you didn't say it that way. But you said, you did? You didn't use just. Why don't you tell me what you said? Clarity.
You said it right.
I said it right? Okay. He said, shouldn't we have this principle where we respect our elders? Okay? And with this being a very strong cultural value, I think it's important for us to talk about, because our elders are seen in our communities as those custodians of wisdom, right? That's why we talk about respecting our elders. When you think about where we've come from, whether we are, in the Caribbean or in Africa or wherever we are in the diaspora, we come from communities where our elders were elevated. And our elders shared their wisdom to us for us to move forward. I recently was on a training through work for, it was Indigenous awareness training. And it actually made me get some tears in my eyes when I sat in the circle and understood that the elders in the circle of an Indigenous community sit immediately across from the teens and the young adults. And the reason for that is they get life from the young adults and the teens. That zest of life, that energy. And then the teens value and get that wisdom. But what we see sometimes is this sort of, this sweeping statement of, well, you need to just respect your elders. The difference that I had in that circle was the elders respected the young people as well. There was a respect for their energy, a respect for their ideas, a respect for what they're bringing to the table. And the young people respect the elders for their wisdom and their guidance and their care and their nurturing. And so it's important that even though we are a culture that elevates our elders and we are taught to respect authority, that we have to understand that it has to go both ways. I think our elders also, I am going to say it. Our elders, you saw me have that conversation with the Lord in my head. We are living in a crucial time where our young people are making a decision as to where they want to be and who they want to be. What they don't receive from us inside these walls or inside our homes, they will go into the world and find. Because the enemy has created a lot of cozy spaces where they will be respected and they will be accepted and they will be loved. And so if we don't challenge the way in which we look at our young people and the way in which we need to honor and create that safe, soft space for them to land, we don't have a right to now come and pray and say, my child is gone, my child left the church, my child, my child, my child. We have to take accountability and responsibility for what we say and what we do. We have oral traditions and storytelling, and the way that this kind of plays in conflict is that our resolution around conflict can involve some sort of narrative approaches. For me, growing up in my house, it was those proverbs. I can still hear my dad say, after the event, the fool becomes wise. If he does not become wise, he will forever remain a fool. Okay? I used to hate when he said those things, but now they come up in me. And that's how he taught me. He taught me in conflict, if I don't become wise, I'm going to repeat the same mistake over and over and over again. My dad was teaching me conflict resolution through those things. So we have those, that in our culture that really supports those lessons and learning, even like things like Anansi stories and all of that kind of stuff that, you know, that teach us things. My sister-in-law's in the room. She's a children's author. It's through our stories that we can really begin to craft narratives for our children so that they can see themselves, and we can even as adults. Sometimes I'm reading these children's stories or watching these children's movies with my little grandson, and I'm like, this is impacting me. Like, I need to understand this lesson. So through the power of storytelling. We talked a little bit about our religious influences and our emotional expression and passion, but one thing I want to talk about for us is our colonial legacy and power dynamics. We have been an oppressed people, and what has been taught to us by the colonizers and by our oppressors, that is what we have used in our relationships. It is hurtful and it is harmful. So some of the things that we maybe laugh at and we say that our parents did, or we can say that we've done to our children or in our relationships, some of the ways that we are functioning with our family and with our friends, it does not speak to the unity that God intends for us as a people. And we are taking these lessons down the generational line, and we are causing harm and trauma to people. And we have a responsibility and accountability to be aware of how those influences, how those chains are still playing out in our conversations. Some of the things where I think about how we speak to each other. We say a lot of things, and we let our mouths, our tongues just fly. If you have a loving relationship with someone, there are some words that we should never speak. You remember when you were kids, and maybe it's just me growing up, they used to say sticks and stones may break your bones, but names will never hurt me. And then you spend the rest of your life trying to recover from the names and the words that people told you. And it's kind of interesting because I talked to my dad about this a lot. Like in Jamaica, they put a name on you, right? So if you broke a leg, they call you Brookfoot for the rest of your life. Like, it's a thing. Like, my dad will be telling me a story and tell me, like, the man's name is Stumpy. And I'm like, Stumpy? Like, why do you call him that? Cousin put him on out the truck and the truck take off him on. And I'm like, Dad, that's not, like, we can't do those things. We call people names, we do different things, but the words that we have, and I'm using something that I think we take in jest oftentimes, but our words have power. I remember I was in Jamaica with my dad, and I was at Tasty's Patties, and we were just so good. And we were just sitting there, and a man came up, and my dad called him whatever this name was, whatever this nickname. And the man got so angry. He got so mad with my father, and he actually knew it was my dad because of the name my dad used. And he got mad. And this man looked like he was probably in his 70s. And my dad told me, yeah, when I was about 12, this happened, and I named him that. And I said, do you understand that you have repeatedly traumatized this man? And 60 years later, you're still calling him by this name. So our words have power. The things that we say have power. And I think we can't take back our words. When we embarrass someone, when we name call, when we disparage someone, when we insult someone, when we criticize, when we judge, we can't take it back. So you say it in a moment of anger, but it lives in someone's heart forever. There are some times you're looking at that person who you've forgiven them, and it comes right back to you when they called you that name, when they criticized you in that way. Our words have power, and we need to take ownership of what comes out of our mouth. So criticism and judgment, insults and name calling, gossip and rumors, dismissiveness, and minimizing someone. These are some of the things that we do out of hurt or out of our emotional passion. And then we have some more egregious things like manipulation and gaslighting. When someone is telling you that there's an issue and then you turn it around on them and make it look like they're the ones that have that issue, or they're the ones with the problem, instead of actually taking that accountability and responsibility. Threats and intimidation. And a big one, sarcasm and passive aggressiveness. We touched on this last week. And these types of things can make environments hostile and very difficult for people to communicate. And the biggest one, I think, or not maybe the biggest one, but another one, it's rejection and exclusion. There's a big conversation, of course, around how do we allow people to feel included. I'm going to ask someone to find James, or if you can read it, if someone can read it for me out loud, James 3, verse 5 to 6. Anyone want to read it?
It can set your whole life on fire, for it is set on fire by hell itself.
I've been living in James this week. Last week it was Romans. And I'm just amazed at what James says about the tongue, what James says about our responsibility. James says, a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And that's very relevant in this day and age for us to understand what forest fires actually look like. That's our tongue. That is our tongue. He says our tongue is a flame of fire. It is a whole world of wickedness. Right here. It is my tongue that corrupts the body. The scriptures also tell us that it's not what goes into a person that defiles them, but what comes out. It's our words. It can set your whole life on fire. And I would say, set the life of other people, set other people's lives on fire, our tongue. And it is set on fire by hell itself. So when I talk about controlling our tongue and that our words matter, do we want to be wielding a weapon that hell can use in our relationships? Or do we want to be using the weapon that God ordained for it to be? Also in James, and I didn't put the scripture up here, but I think it's important, James 1 verse, oh, help my eyes, Lord. I think it's 19. It says, "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. So get rid of all the filth and evil in your lives and humbly accept the word God has planted in your hearts, for it has the power to save your souls." Our tongue, our words, God is calling us into accountability. We're harming each other by the things we say out of our mouth. James chapter 3, verse 9 to 10, it says, "People can tame all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and fish, but no one can tame the tongue. It is restless and evil, full of deadly poison. Sometimes it praises our Lord and Father, and sometimes it curses those who have been made in the image of God." And last week we talked about the fact that our approach to conflict really demonstrates whether or not we love God's children. How we manage conflict is a real indicator as to whether or not we love each other. And so blessing and cursing come pouring out of the same mouth. Surely, my brothers and sisters, this is not right. When we were setting up just now earlier, Greg said to me, "Do you need 2 microphones?" And he made a joke. He says, "Well, you only have 1 mouth." So then how does blessing and cursing come out of the same place? How do I sing praises to my Lord and then use my mouth to pull down someone else? Keep your words soft and sweet. You may have to eat them. So what is our goal in conflict? What is our goal in our relationships? When we're having these conversations, is our goal to be understood or to understand? If everybody's goal is to understand, then guess what? We're all understood. Is your goal for dialogue or for debate? And we have to check ourselves on this when we are in situations. Do I want a dialogue? Because a dialogue is a two-way street where we're talking, we're understanding each other, we're connecting with each other. I'm understanding you, you're getting something from me. We're moving closer together. Debate is polarizing. And if you don't believe me, just go watch one of those Democratic whatever things and this happened in the States. What is your goal? Justice or mercy? I'll let you sit with that one. Is our goal victory or connection? And what bubbles up for us is pride. It's our pride. We want to win. We want to be right in that argument. But at what cost does that win come? It comes at the cost of disconnection with the people that you love. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And I want to just touch on this. I want Craig to come up. Craig, you want to come up while I'm talking about this? This guy, he's a good guy, man. He really is. I'm a lot, guys. I'm a lot. I have a lot to say. But he's a good guy. Faith without works is dead.
Check.
And sometimes when we talk about faith, we talk about it like when we talk about faith without works is dead, we think about things like, oh, we have a question here? Okay. We talk about things like, So I want to get that job. So what is the works that I have to do? I got to apply. I got to put myself out there, right? I can't just sit here and wait for God to drop this job in my lap. What is another example of faith without works is dead? Give me another example.
Looking for a relationship.
Yeah, that's a good
Right?
one. Looking for a relationship. I can't sit on my sofa and expect it's going to find me. I got to get out there. I got to date. I got to meet people, right? But do we think about this in terms of our relationships? Like, do we have faith that God truly restores? That he truly heals? Like, do we believe that he can fix relationships and mend the brokenness inside of our hearts and the hearts of others? If that's the case, then we need to take the step of faith, bold steps of faith, to dive in, to have those difficult conversations, and to move towards each other. That's the faith in conflict. The faith, that's the work in conflict, is taking those steps towards resolution. Those steps, instead of putting our hands up and saying, well, like we said last week, that friendship was just for a season, and let it fly out the window. So I want to just show you, there's a few things here. We have this acronym CLEAR. This is how we approach our situations of conflict. And then I'm going to make my husband have his Emmy award-winning performance with me. We're going to do a little role play for you, put our business out on the streets. But in conflict, what's important is that when there's an issue that pops up, we need clarity. We need to understand what the issue is. Sometimes we're arguing about two different things. We're talking and discussing two different things. What is the actual issue? Okay? Then we have to listen actively. Okay? We need to turn our ears on. We need to listen to what the person is saying. Give our full attention to them, not try to create our response to them. Just hear them. I promise you, you will not miss your words when they finish talking. You'll be able to find what it is you have to say. And in that active listening, you have to actually hear and validate what they're saying. So you need to reflect back what they've said to you to make sure that you have understanding. And then there's the expression. You express yourself respectfully. You use those I statements to talk about yourself, not about them. Talk about how you're feeling, what's happening, to share your perspective. And you need to be honest, but be kind. Then we have to agree on a solution, and then we have to revisit and repair. So using that, Craig and I are going to show you a situation, and I'm going to ask you what your thoughts are on this particular situation. Ooh.
Okay, this is part of my little skit here. Just move down a little bit. Just move over a little bit. So, Paul, I'm not sure if you got a chance, but I had some amazing vegetarian mutton downstairs. Did you have a chance to get any? No. Man, I wish I can get that mutton like that at home. I really do. Anyway, nice talking to you. I'll see you another time. So now we're back at home. La-Toya and I are having dinner. Pretend we're sitting down, but we're having dinner. Are you okay? Like, you don't seem yourself.
I'm fine.
No, seriously. Like, you haven't really even talked to me, Rach, like the last few days.
I said I'm fine.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to continue to eat. This food is so good. Your food is always so good.
Is it good, though? Is
Yes.
it good? Is it good like the veggie mutton you had at church?
Oh, that's where we're going.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's where we're going
okay.
today, Craig. Yeah. You know, you already know that I feel insecure. Everybody in the church knows how to cook, and I don't know how to cook. And I've been struggling for so many years to impress your family and your friends, and I feel very insecure about it. And then you go and talk to Brother Paul. in front of everybody.
I
Everybody
think
heard.
You're blowing this out of proportion. Yes, there's lots of good cooks. Like Sue is an amazing cook, and Donna
Who else?
and my sister.
Yeah, who else?
They're all good cooks.
Everybody's a
but
good
you
cook.
are a good cook as well.
No, because you told Brother Paul in front of everybody that you don't get
It was
veggie
just a
mutton like that.
conversation between me and him. Nobody else heard.
I heard. That means everybody else heard, and you upset me. I felt disrespected, and you know that that's a soft spot for me.
You know what? This is why people go on separate vacations.
Excuse me? Pardon me? Separate vacations? You're going to be doing a lot of things separate lately with this type of attitude.
All right. You know what? This is getting out of
Veggie
hand.
mutton. You
I'm
gotta
just
be
going to
kidding
finish
me.
my dinner in the other room.
Yeah,
I think the
finish your
NBA
dinner.
game is
How
on tonight.
about you do that? How
All
about
right,
you do
all
that?
right,
Walk
fine.
away. Yeah,
All
walk
right.
away like you always do.
Yeah.
This is not based on real events. I believe I can cook. I can cook. So I want to ask you.
You see how she's a lot to deal with?
So what did you notice during the conversation? What's that? It escalated quickly? Craig was not listening? What's that? I wasn't listening either. Neither of us were listening. He was dismissive, assumptions. While he was talking, I didn't give him a chance. I kept talking. What did you say? Yes, I already came to a conclusion, clearly. Perception? Yeah, we were talking about one thing, and then we jumped to something else.
Yes, projecting on Craig.
I was projecting or transferring my insecurities on him. Yeah, and I was angry. I'm glad you picked up on that. Yeah, my tone. So what went well in that conversation? Nothing. Nothing went well in that conversation. So what strategies could we use to actually, before I ask that one, where do you see yourself in this? Everywhere. Quite a bit. Probably more than I would hope to see of myself.
I think quite often we want to protect ourselves, and so we speak. So if we think about it, all of us, we have this circle, and we draw this circle around ourselves. And if we feel that the circle has been breached, then obviously we become very defensive. So most of us, yeah, even all of us, that's how we behave. If we think about it, it's about defending me, my issues, about defending me, my child. It's about defending me. So if we think about it, you know, most of us are actually identified there because we want to protect me.
I love that. We're trying to protect ourselves. And the reality is, as relationships, we're actually called to be vulnerable. We're actually called to be vulnerable and to lay ourselves down, lay our lives down. And some of us think that when we read that scripture, lay your life down for your brother, we think, well, I got to die for them. But laying our life down is in these situations where that thing that I have that I want to protect, or, you know, how it makes me feel, or all those insecurities, can we lay those things down for someone else? So what strategies could be used to improve the outcome? What do you think Craig and I should do? Yes, Naveen.
You should have just told him how you were feeling first. You were just venting to yourself and ignoring him. And then you made a snide remark. And got it going. But you should have just started by expressing and asking him for clarity as to what he meant by that.
So you caught that, right? Like, he's asking me, how are you? I'm fine. And no woman in the history of ever, when she says, I'm fine, is fine. Okay? If that's the one tidbit that you men can take away today, when we say we're fine, we're not fine.
I was actually going to speak on that very same thing.
From experience?
But instead of saying it that way, I would have said to start off with honesty first. Because when Craig came in, and first of all, one of the things I noticed that he was very observant of your state of mind, your state of being. right? Even though he was chowing down on the food, he was noticing that you were a little bit uneasy, and then he inquired out of concern, are you okay? The words that came after that pretty much caused things to spiral into a conflict, because you said, I'm fine. But you didn't just say, I'm fine. You said, I'm fine.
It was the way you said it.
Yeah.
So it's not just what you said, but also how you said it. So if you were honest with him and honest with yourself right out the gate, then he would have realized that something is off. Let me try and address the issue. The issue at that time was not necessarily the food. The food wasn't the issue. The issue was what he said and how you felt about what he said, and then you could have addressed that. But then, because it started off on the wrong footing from the get-go, it just became
a whole mess.
A whole mess.
And he's going on vacation by himself and he's gone.
Exactly. So start out with honesty and stick with honesty all the way through.
Yeah, Craig should keep his mouth. Okay, so we're gonna do part two. We're gonna do part two. Go ahead.
I think also giving yourself time to reflect, because sometimes you're just not in the capacity to respond right away. So maybe it's there is a lot on my mind, but right now, if I open my mouth, I'm gonna say something that's unkind. So having a time for him to be actually, I'm not okay, but can you give me 30 minutes, an hour, and can we come back to this so that we can have a conversation? I think there was the other part where now a vacation came up and it's now you're going on vacation. So it shows that there was previous things that also weren't. So if you took the time to reflect, be okay, I feel upset about this, but I've also been reminded of X, Y, and Z. Can we set aside a time to communicate everything that I've been frustrated about?
And it goes back to that knowing yourself as well, knowing yourself. And sometimes you just want to address the issue in the moment, and you have to show self-restraint, because you have to know, based on living with myself for all of these years, that the outcome's not going to be a good outcome. It's not going to be a good outcome. This is not going to be my first, now I'm amazingly being able to solve conflict in 5 minutes. Let yourself come down. Think about it. Do you know that there's times where there's something that really gets me hot and upset, and when I step away, and sometimes I do angry cleaning, I'll clean and whatever, and during that process, the fog clears enough for me to actually hear the voice of the Lord. And that rationality comes, and it's all of a sudden the Lord's showing me all of these nice things that Craig has done for me and all the beautiful things, and I'm that really, really didn't matter. And if it still does matter, then maybe that is something I can raise in a different way. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the other point I would like to make too. Both of you were adding fire to the fuel to the fire, right? And maybe Craig could have recognized the emotional state you're in, and try to de-escalate a bit, or give you more time or space before you come back to the topic.
Such a great segue.
I know. We should have had these people in year one of our marriage right here. Okay, so are we good? I know we're a little over time. Can we, if you need to slip out, please slip out. Craig and I will just continue role playing until the sun sets. Okay, go ahead, hon. Go ahead.
All right. So same scenario. Speaking to Paul, we were back having dinner.
The next day.
So, how you doing?
I'm fine.
See, the reason I'm asking, because you don't seem like you're fine. You're not yourself, and you're not really having conversations with me the way you normally do.
I'm fine, Craig. It's not a problem.
All right. Well, let me just get back to this meal. It's a beautiful dinner, actually. It's so good.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah, is it beautiful like the veggie mutton Sister Bev made at church that you were talking to Paul about? Is it beautiful like that?
Oh, so this is why you're upset. You heard my comment.
Yeah, I don't know why you have to ask me if I'm fine. You know I'm not fine. We've been married for, how long have we been married? You know I'm not fine.
You know, I have to apologize. I was just joking when I was talking to Paul, but It was insensitive. I shouldn't have said that.
Listen, talking about my cooking is not something that I find funny. And you hurt my feelings with that situation. And everybody heard. And it's hard enough for me, like Sue knows how to cook, Valine knows how to cook, everybody else knows how to cook in this church, and I'm struggling, and you're here talking to Paul about the fact that you had the best veggie mutton of your life.
La-Toya, I have to tell you, you are a wonderful cook. I've made many compliments.
I don't believe
in the
that, Craig. I just don't.
Okay. Well, you know what? Maybe now is not the time to continue this
It's
conversation.
not the time, because you upset my soul. You upset me.
Okay.
And now the whole dinner, everything's ruined.
So what I'm going to say is I am apologizing to you, but let's just revisit this maybe a couple hours, maybe tomorrow, when we can have level heads.
Yeah, I just need a moment. I need a moment. I'm going to go have a shower and chill.
I'm going to give you the time.
Let's do that.
Okay.
So, I think from what you shared, what was different about Craig's response? He was validating, he was listening, he was apologetic, he took the humble road, and did that work for him? What's that? A little bit. I wasn't as bad.
But nothing was resolved.
Pastor said, did you say you were terrible or you weren't terrible? Which one, Pastor? I think it was you were terrible. Yes, it was terrible. I still didn't, he's coming with humility. And we've had people, and I'm still upset because I just want to be upset now. But the difference with this is the first time Craig allowed me to drag him into my pit of emotional distress. And this is one of those pictures that I want us to understand, that we have the power to be who we want to be, even in the midst of the situation and the circumstance. He gave a valiant effort. He tried. He humbled himself. He took accountability. He apologized. And I still just wanted to be down there in the dumps. I wanted to be miserable and upset and angry. But he didn't come with me. He didn't come with me. And so we do have choice. And it's not because you're learning or you understand conflict management that everything that comes down your pathway now is going to work. You are going to be frustrated when you try to use the techniques and you try to be more thoughtful about how you approach things. Some people are not there yet and may never be. But it's how do we manage ourselves and maintain our peace in the midst of that, because God is calling us to be accountable. Go ahead.
Well, my description of Craig's approach this time around was that he remained focused on the issue at hand. Even though you were giving him a lot of, I would say, emotional responses, he chose to look at the fact that you are not necessarily upset at him, but at the issue, and he started to just focus on the issue and not what you're saying. But then realizing that you were not in the right space to discuss the issue, he chose to suggest, let us revisit this at another time. Because then if he took it as an attack on him as he did before, he would have responded in kind. But realizing that you're not getting anywhere and we're not able to resolve the issue, as he said, afterwards nothing was resolved, then he was able to still maintain his peace because of the approach that he took. And it's a mental thing that he had to go through to ensure that he could not de-escalate, because you did not de-escalate because of him, but he remained composed during the moment. Yeah.
And so how do we remove ourselves, right? We have boundaries. We have our own personal boundaries. I'm responsible for my own space and who I am. And Craig was in a situation where I was hot, I wasn't coming down, he was trying all the techniques and everything like that. So he's like, I don't really want to be in this space with you anymore. We're not getting anywhere, so you take the moment that you need, and I'm going to watch basketball and be in my peaceful place, right? Whatever it is. And so we do have the ability to make those decisions. I don't know who has the mic there. Oh, go ahead, Joan.
So one question I have, or perhaps something that we should talk about, is how do we correctly say, I'm sorry? How do we correctly apologize to someone? Is it, I'm sorry, or Jamaicans may say, I never mean to do it, or that's not what I meant, or something of that sort. But is there a structure for a genuine apology? And in my mind, the way I see a proper apology is, one, acknowledging the thing that you did, and also incorporating that in the apology. I'm sorry for X, and whatever comes after that.
Part 3. We're going to give you part 3.
Part 3 is coming up.
But you're right, because I also get around apologies. I see your hand. Around apologies, do you know how many times at work there are issues? And for those, I do conflict management at work, and there's an issue that's happening, and someone says, I want Paul. Paul needs to apologize. And Paul's not interested in apologizing. Well, he needs to apologize. Do you want a forced apology from someone? No. Like, we need to stop telling our kids, say sorry, say sorry. We need to explain to them, how do we apologize and what are we apologizing for? You're taking accountability for something that you did, like Joan said. You're taking accountability. And when we apologize, we don't have to be in agreement with what happened. We don't have to agree. Craig doesn't have to agree that he was disrespectful to me or anything like that. What he's apologizing for is what his actions, the impact that his actions had on me. And he's free to state his intention. He should state his intention, because if he was intentionally trying to create something, that makes a difference for me. So he should be clear about what his intention is and take accountability that what I did, although not intentional, caused you harm. And for that, I am sorry. And then there is another part to your apology around what do we do moving forward. I'm going to take this one first here, not just because she's my sister-in-law.
Thank you. Something that I have recently come across is not getting attached to the idea of what the solution or the end result should be. When you have an attachment to a desired outcome, then you're going to continue to push and pursue in that direction, as opposed to understanding what it is that you may need to work out, the time that it may take, and being able to have that moment to self-reflect as well. So just not being attached to any particular outcome, but moving through to find a solution, perhaps at a later time.
That's so good. And last week we talked about the fact that that chasm between our expectations and reality is disappointment, and that's where we live. So when we think it is going to look a certain way, we're going to fall into that chasm, because it very rarely goes the way we think it should go. But to really stay open, and that's a hard thing. We want things to be buttoned up nicely. We want, it to have this resolve, and we grew up reading books with these little fairy tale endings, and that's what we hope for. But real life is not like that. It's not like that. All right.
Quick.
Oh, sure. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just a quick note on the apology. The words "I'm sorry" are not necessarily just an apology, because some persons may think by saying "I'm sorry you feel that way" is an apology. The words "I'm sorry" is in my statement, but "I'm sorry you feel that way" does not truly portray or relay that I am sorry for my part in how you feel. So knowing how to structure your words and truly own the part, your contribution to the outcome, is what really helps to let that apology actually be genuine and effective, as my fellow sister here was actually inquiring about.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate that, and this is where the accountability part is really important in your expression, taking that accountability. We said earlier, you can't make someone feel anything, but we have impact on others. I used the example last week. If I'm in the parking lot and Pastor runs over my foot with his car, even though he didn't mean to, he's just trying to get out of the parking lot. I know he's mad I brought that example back up again. He's like, why? But he's just trying to get out of the parking lot. So he's not going to look at me and say, I'm sorry you feel hurt. You take accountability for your part in that. And even though Craig had no intention, maybe even for me to hear, or he was just making a comment flippantly, he had no intention for it to have the impact that it did. He now has to stand in the fact that it did create an impact for me. And so to acknowledge that. And that's also a part of when we talk about building healthy relationships. What are you going to do now that I've given you that feedback? I've given you the feedback that something that you said has hurt me, made me feel I felt disrespected by it. Maybe it touched on an insecurity that I have. So what are you going to do about that? Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way, and just keep living? If you want to connect and build a relationship with me, you have to take in that feedback and make some adjustments and understand. I said last week that if I come home and I say something here and Craig responds and I respond, I know what's going to happen. And I told you someone's going to end up sleeping someplace other than our bedroom, and it's not going to be me. But I know the cycle that's going to happen. If he understands that this is a soft spot for his wife or his friend or his sibling or his parent or his colleague, you now have a responsibility and accountability with that information to adjust. And it doesn't mean you're always going to be perfect. You can't always get it right. We are going to stick our foot in our mouths. We are going to make mistakes. That's why this Bible is full of grace and mercy and forgiveness, because we need it. Today, it's the veggie mutton, but tomorrow I'm going to do something to him. And I'm going to need the same grace that he's pouring out on me. He's going to have to pour that out for me as well. So let's do part 3. Veggie Mutton Chronicles.
Later that night.
Hey, hon. Sevens, this dinner is awesome, as
Aw.
usual. Yep.
Can I talk to you about something?
Of course, sure.
I'm going to be honest. I've been thinking about this for a couple days just because I know I can be hot with some things. I know I can get upset, and I was upset about this thing, and I just wanted to give myself an opportunity, a moment to really think, do I need to really be mad about this thing? Like, does this thing really matter? Mm-hmm. But I've thought about it, and I just wanted to share it with you because it's something that did upset me.
Okay, what are we talking about?
Do you remember the comment you made to Brother Paul about the veggie mutton?
Oh.
Yeah.
You heard that?
I did. I think a few people heard it, actually. And I just wanted to let you know that you know how I feel about my cooking. It's been a really soft spot for me, and there's a lot of pressure from, your family and friends, and we're just in a community where so many people cook so well. So it touched a nerve for me when you said you don't get this at home, and it just made me feel a little bit insecure. And I don't know if you meant to be disrespectful, but you were laughing, and just the way that it was happening, it just hit me that way.
La-Toya, I'm really sorry. I mean, what I'm hearing from you is you felt disrespected, you felt dismissed, you feel insecurity around your cooking. Because yes, there are a lot of great cooks in our community, even in our family. And what I said, even though it was, just so you know, it was actually a joke. I was just joking around. But you didn't take it that way. You were really offended by that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I felt. Like, it just made me feel away.
I'm really sorry. It never should have been said, like, whether I'm joking or not. Like, it was an insensitive comment. And especially recognizing you've said these things before. You've mentioned some of these things before about your insecurities about cooking and how all these people are great cooks. And for me to say something like that, even to one person, the fact that even more people heard makes it even worse. So I'm really, really sorry. I just really hope you forgive me. And that's something I really recognize now and make sure it never happens again.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I I really appreciate that. I was struggling about coming to you because I didn't want this to become like a big argument. That's why I really wanted to think about it, but it bothered me that much that I wanted to share it. And the fact that you really heard me and took that in, I accept your apology. And I also recognize that there's some things that I need to work on myself. You know, some of those insecurities are things that I need to kind of spend some time. So I just appreciate your patience.
I appreciate that. But there's one more thing I really think it's important for me to recognize, is you came to me so quickly after this happened. There are times, and many people, even in our lives, where I might have done something, maybe not even recognizing it, and you maybe let it fester for days, for weeks. And when we finally spoke about it, it became a huge argument, much huger than it should have been. And the fact that you didn't wait, you came to me right away, and also the way in which you came to me. You came to me respectfully, calmly. All of those things just really added to just making us come to a resolution with this rather quickly. So I really want to thank you for the way in which you approached me.
You're welcome. We kept it PG. We're at church. So what did you see there? And I know, like, the dialogue maybe sounds like, do people really talk to each other that way? I'm going to actually be really honest with you that this is actually real with Craig and I. We don't always do it this way, but we have a lot of conversations like this. And they end really well, and we put on a show, or we go out, or we do whatever. There's some that go off the rails, but because we do this, we actually know that we can come back to this. So even for the ones that go off the rails, it's easier for us to come back and be like, that did not go well. Like, and to take accountability for what didn't go well, and we know how to get it back on track. Any comments or questions?
So what if, in a case, your veggie mutton really needs more paprika?
It's a good question, though, right? I think it just would be a different conversation. I think he still has to take accountability for making that comment and how I felt about that situation. And then maybe there is another time where we can talk about how Sister Bev makes her veggie mutton or whatever, like, what's kind of, but I think it's not that in that moment. And I think that sometimes that's it, right? We want to be like, well, your veggie mutton really doesn't taste good like that. But that's not the point, right? It's exactly what Shane was saying. It's like you have to understand and stay on topic with what this person has brought to you in this moment. One of the things that takes us off the rails too is I came to Craig with the issue that I had, and then now if Craig starts to open up, well, you said this before and you did that before. It's like, whoa. Can we just talk about this for a minute? Like, can we just focus on what I raised? And once we deal with that, then we can talk about what your grievances are. But sometimes we let those things build up. And we think we're being so forgiving and so kind. And then as soon as someone has an issue, we want to let the floodgates go on all the things we've been storing up.
I'll just have to say, to get the cherry on the top, go on vacation, you two.
Yeah, together maybe. Maybe after that last conversation we can go together.
One point.
Sure.
I like the fact that Craig used, Carl Rogers talk about being non-judgmental, or, positive, what's the word again?
He
positive,
mirrored. Yes.
Yeah, but what I really like is the fact that you use the I language.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think a lot of us, we tend to point fingers.
Yes.
You talk about what you did. You focus on feelings rather than, this is what you did. And then you talk about how you felt and then how she felt. So you kind of took the sting out of the conversation in that sense. So it's very important. There's something that is called the I language, which Craig used perfectly well. Tells me that your wife has trained you very well.
He knew that one before I came along.
but that's in most conversation. If we learn to use that, not just in relationship conversation, But in most conversation, if we learn to use the I language, rather than say, you did that, you said, okay, as you said, I'm sorry I did that, and I'm sorry that you felt that way, rather than, so it changes the dynamics, it changes the conversation, and then you can both lean into the conversation, and then it grows from there.
Right.
Rather than saying, you did that, this is what you did. I don't feel you took ownership, you took responsibility, and then you talk about how you felt and how she felt. And I think that was amazing. Thank you, La-Toya.
No problem. I think there's a few other hands going up, but while the mic is coming there,
Get to the
one of the
camera,
things
man.
that I absolutely love about Craig, and it's something that I've started to do just in other areas of my life as well as a result of being with him, is he finds positive things to say. So even in that situation where I was sharing what my issue was, the way he affirmed me at the end, that's absolutely something that he does. Like, he will tell me, I really liked how you came to me. Like, thank you for telling me in that way. As opposed to, well, if you could only just talk to me that way every time instead of losing, right? Like, he just politely affirms what he likes, what he appreciates. And then, like anyone else, when someone tells you what they appreciate, you can give them more of what they appreciate very easily.
So
That's
good
my
job
cousin.
with the skit there. Good job. I'm glad he talks like that all the time. But in terms of timeliness, you said it happened a couple days ago, and he said you came quickly. I'm glad you didn't discuss it on the way home from church. But timeliness, I saw a difference there. Is it because the person might be usually longer in holding that? Why you said he said, I'm glad you came to me quickly. But you said it was a couple days. So is there a time difference there between husband and wife?
Yeah, I think it's relative for who you are in your relationship. Like, if you are someone that leans into stonewalling and silent treatment and you can go for weeks at a time, you need to check that. You really need to check that. Because usually what happens is people will use that as a tool, and they'll make things uncomfortable for someone until they move. But I think what Craig was acknowledging was that he knew, because you saw from part 1 and part 2, that I could get hot. And so he knew that I actually went through a process and that I came to him with that. He didn't have to be the one to say, what's going on? It's been how many days? You're treating me like this, and he's living in this fog. So I think that was an acknowledgement of the fact that you did come to me in a timely fashion. And that's going to look different. Brother Steve, it's going to... I picked on him last time he comes and sits in the same seat. You want a little more picking on. So I think that that's what it was, an acknowledgement of that. But it's going to be different for everybody. My advice, if I can give some advice or encouragement, is don't wait too long. You don't have to address everything immediately, and there's going to be some things that are a lot more egregious that require you to come down and to really think through your response and what are some of the outcomes potentially that could happen here, what's the fallout if I say this or do that. You do need to consider that, but the longer you wait, I'm telling you, it does not get better. It doesn't get better. But good picking up on that timeliness piece. I think it's over here first, and then, yeah.
Yeah, I think those role plays were pretty much telling, reflecting some of the very same issues that not just spouse, but happens in relationships in general. And what I do admire is the flow of conflict resolution. It's not static, right? So it may start off with what was in the first left quadrant again? Competitive.
Competitive, yeah.
And that's how Craig was in the initial stage, and also yourself at some point, very combative. And then eventually, by second scene, things kind of little taper down into negotiation, as in scene 3. What I do picked up from that is saying you're sorry, or being repentive is not necessarily a verbal cue all the time, but sometimes non-verbal cue does play an equally or even more important role in the apology. Very important thing to do is to understand your partner, whether it be your spouse or the person you are having the relationship with, your friend or your family member, once you understand that individual, you know their personality type, and in terms of conflict resolution, you may decide to start from one aspect of the quadrant in terms of resolving that issue. And timing is paramount. And also, a critical thing is tone, because you can say you're sorry, right? But the way you say it and the timing in which you say it, it's not ideal. And saying you're sorry could simply mean you walk with a flower and, hand it with a gentle kiss or hug to your spouse. It all depends on the situation and the timing of it. And then understanding your spouse. And the ultimate resolution is to compromise and restore the relationship.
Thank you. You took us around that whole conflict communication styles, and I think it's important to know that we do need to move through there accordingly. Like we can't just live in one box, that we have many different options. So thank you for that.
Yeah, there's one thing that Craig did in his response, which I think we could all incorporate. He demonstrated to you that he was listening by saying, did I hear you say such and such? And then he made his list, and he's able to clarify with you. So that gives you the sense that he was listening, and you were able to clarify, yes, this is how I'm feeling. And I think this is something we could incorporate in our own conflict resolution, in our own disagreements. Just listen to what the person's saying, repeat back to them, is it this what you're saying? Get the clarity, and then you could move on in agreement from there.
That's a big diffuser. I'm going to go here. I think for time's sake, we'll just take these last two, but that's a big diffuser because we talked about that last week. People want to be heard. It's not even that you need to agree with people, but there is so much power in just acknowledging and hearing what someone said. O'Shea?
Yeah, so my comment on what Craig's approach, not only Craig, but yours also in some sense, had to do with what my brother here touched on in the latter part of his comment, which was the tonality of the delivery. The Bible says that a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. And it's a balancing act between tone and your words. And what I also want to point out is that he said, everything that he said it with his chest. He was assertive in what he was saying, and you were also assertive in what you were saying. Not necessarily just to project and be loud, but to ensure that whatever it is I'm saying is I'm delivering it in a way that can connect directly to you. So his apology, even if he didn't say I'm sorry, but what he said came from the heart and it projected directly into you because, of course, he said it with his chest.
Yeah, you can feel when someone's being genuine, especially if you know them.
Yeah.
My sister right here in the green. Yeah. Sister Spence.
I was just thinking that you folks didn't manifest that in your dealings, but I was just thinking about it as you're talking about rehashing and recording. Some people are historians. Remember when you did that thing to me 2 years ago or 3 years ago? Always rehashing, bring up.
Not helpful.
Yeah, and that's where in this acronym, it's really clarifying the issue. Like you start an argument someplace and you don't end up, south of the equator. Like let's let the issue be the issue. And we don't have to sit here and resolve every issue today in this conversation. So let's focus on the one that's at hand. And deal with that. And as you listen through that, as you express, use those I statements, reflect, as you agree on your solution, you take accountability and move forward. That's where we start to see that we build trust with each other. We build trust when we do those things. And the first time that Craig did this, we actually did couples therapy before we even got married, actually. We wanted to see, what's really going on here in this relationship, or do we have what we need to actually make it? And we started to learn some of these, and we don't always use it exactly, but I can tell you the moments where we do use that mirroring and where we stay on topic, we have the best outcomes. And this works for me at work. And not just because I help other people, but I deal with conflict directly with the people that I work with too. I'm like everybody else. And things come up, but really to just take that moment to reflect back, to repeat back, to make sure we're both talking about the same thing and take that accountability. It goes so far. Like even if you do the first 3, if you just do the CLE, you know, if you start with the C, if you do move on to the L, like as you start to implement this, you are going to see some significant shifts in how you communicate and interact with the people in your life. And some of those issues that maybe became hot buttons and things, and you go off and other people go off, you start to see that they dissipate. Pastor's not going to let me come up here anymore because I just take too much time. Ephesians 4:31-32 says, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Instead, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you." God has done something powerful in our lives. He has given us that grace, that mercy, and that forgiveness, and we need to pour that out. We need to pour that out to each other. We learned a lot. I'm going to land on this last one here, that we can walk away knowing that God has the power to heal and to restore our broken relationships. My responsibility, and you can put yourself here, my responsibility is to move forward in faith towards peace and reconciliation. So if I am looking at my relationships and I'm not taking those steps, then I'm shirking the responsibility that God has given me because He's able. So my work in that is to take those steps forward. We asked a lot of questions. They shut me off, Pastor. I want to just say thank you to everyone who came out. I know it was hard. I know we had a little bit of conflict, even around the timing today. We did live stream it. I want to thank those of you who watched online and those of you who will go back and maybe watch the rest, watch it again. This has been a powerful series for me. In my personal journey, and also to be able to bring something that I hold very dearly into a space that I hold very dear. So I thank you for your participation, your questions, your engagement, and your support. It has meant a lot. So thank you all.
If you notice, Greg stood first. I wonder why. Right, wasn't it amazing? Both presentations were amazing. So what's step number 2 from this? In November, I'm going to get another 2 individuals, right? We will have a short divine service, and then we'll use the gym, the church, and the chapel, and we will have different presentations around issues that are relevant to the members of the church. Are we together? So it's in my head at the moment, right? I'm going to sit down and kind of rotate around it, right? Because what we want not just to learn about the Bible, but there are real issues that are affecting members of this church, all of us. And we have individuals in our church who are trained in areas that can help us to be better people. Are we together? So in November, we're going to use the gym, the church, and the chapel, and we'll have 3 presentations. We'll rotate it, and La-Toya will be she'll be here, right? Maybe 2 presentations in the morning. I'm just going to work it out in my head. All right? So look forward to that. There will be a sermon for about 10-15 minutes. But then surrounding that, we will build on some of the issues. So if there are issues that you would like us to talk about, that you want to learn about, if there are issues in your life that you want to grow out of or grow into, please just send them to me, send them to my email. Come to the office, make a phone call, because what we want is for all of us to have peace of mind and the presence and the power of God. La-Toya, we really appreciate you. I'm going to take you out for lunch, but I'm going to... All right, so we will go for lunch, all right? We will just give me a date and a time. We'll have lunch together, Craig, all right? And we'll sit and we'll talk about this and see the way forward. God bless you. Thank you for staying. 2.5 hours, maybe 3, but you stayed and you learned. Let us stand and let us sing a song. Do you know Let Us Sing a Song that will cheer us by the way? Do you know that one? Yeah. Let us sing a song that will cheer us by the... We'll sing just one stanza because you young people don't know this song. It's for us older people, all right? Let us sing a song that will cheer us by the way. In a little while we're going home. In a little while we're going. In a little while, we will cross the billows. Hallelujah, we shall meet at last where the stormy winds are past. In a little while we're going home. Father, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the learning. May we apply these in our workplaces. May we apply this in the church, in our homes. May these skill sets that we have learned, these tools that we've been given, may we use them to advance our lives and make us better Christians as we prepare for the second coming so we can go home. In Jesus' name, amen. See you on Wednesday night. Please join the prayer meeting. Go online. The information is there. God bless you. We love you. God bless you. Thanks to the AV team for staying back and for helping us. And if somebody lives close to you who does not drive, please give them a drive home. God bless.